So when it comes to supply chain, local is certainly becoming the new global. Bringing production home is becoming much more efficient when it comes to reducing carbon emissions. And this is in every aspect of the supply chain. And of course, the nuclear sector is no different. Countries and continents as a whole are rethinking the way they source their energy, and thus reconsidering the nuclear alternative. Becoming autonomous, local in this sourcing will be the legacy for the next generation. So here to address how we can enhance the energy independence in Europe, we have our next moderator, journalist Eve Jackson.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. Today, we're talking about the role of nuclear power in helping Europe reach net zero by 2050. The discussion is hosted by the world's leading nuclear operator, France's EDF. With industry leaders and experts, as well as a top climate scientist, we'll look at Europe's nuclear renaissance. It could help governments hit climate targets, ensure energy independence, and keep costs down. We'll also discuss the advantages of having a fleet effect across the continent where countries share technology and know-how. In a moment, we'll welcome our prestigious speakers to the stage. But first, here's EDF's vision of nuclear in Europe.
Today we're facing our greatest threat in thousands of years: rapid climate change. Average temperatures have risen 1.2 degrees Celsius since before pre-industrial times. And despite growing scientific, political and public pressure, oil, coal and natural gas are used for about 80% of our energy needs. But the message from scientists is clear: urgent action is needed. Since 2015, 3/4 of planned coal plants have been cancelled. Around 50 countries plan to phase out coal completely, and there's 25 times more solar and 5 times more wind power than 10 years ago. But Europe needs additional independent and sustainable solutions to meet the challenges we face right now. How do individual countries meet demand and be energy independent without fossil fuels? And how do we combat the weaponization of energy caused by tensions in Europe, as well as rising energy prices? France has one of the planet's largest nuclear power programs. It gets 70% of its electricity from nuclear energy, the highest proportion in the world. For years, France has been nourishing domestic nuclear expertise with a fleet of 56 nuclear reactors in operation, and has launched a new domestic program of 6 EPR2s and 8 in option. Nuclear power has enabled France to achieve energy independence, reduce carbon emissions and keep energy costs low, and it's been good for the economy, creating 220,000 jobs. With a European nuclear renaissance underway, EDF wants to share its expertise to help the continent achieve 3 key goals: decarbonisation, security of supply, and a fleet effect across Europe, leveraging synergies between projects of the same Generation 3 technology. Up to 50 new nuclear reactors could be brought online to meet these needs by 2050, and EDF aims to address these projects with its European reactor portfolio. And to make sure we're ready to deliver these projects, EDF is recruiting 10,000 technicians, engineers and other experts every year until 2030. Let's work together to build a net zero future to save our planet and secure jobs and economic growth in Europe.
Some more, I'd like to welcome the Chairman and CEO of EDF. It's a year since Luc Rémont took on this important role in charge of a company with nuclear expertise dating back more than 4 decades. The only European company currently building new nuclear reactors in Europe. Luc Rémont. the world's leading nuclear operator. EDF's slogan at the WNE is "All ready to deliver." What does it mean?
Well, maybe in nuclear we get the pressure before we get the power, you know, and I think the objective clearly is to be ready to enter into the new cycle of the nuclear industry. We've come across already more than 40 years of operations at EDF in nuclear, and these 40 years have been already two different cycles. The first one has been heavy construction, that's 20 years between the 80s and 2000. Then we are finishing 20 years of operations and maintenance with limited construction capacity. Now we enter into a new cycle where we have to continue to maintain and extend the lifetime of our existing operations, so overall 65 reactors that we have, plus construct a lot for ourselves and for our partners. Because the future is made of, as the video has explained, is made of a balance between renewables and nuclear to ensure full decarbonated power at European scale. European states are moving gradually towards nuclear. Of course, EDF can do part of that as an operator. EDF is not going to do everything as operator, so we will work as well. As we move on our own operations and our own constructions, we will also work with our partners so that we can supply and help the development of others. That's the mission that defines probably the next 2 decades for EDF. That's what we stand ready to deliver.
Okay. Well, to talk more about achieving energy independence in Europe and the continent's nuclear renaissance, I'd like to welcome our prestigious speakers to the stage. Climate scientist Valérie Masson-Delmotte, a lead researcher for the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, and also for the French Alternative Energies and Atomic Energy Commission. Also joining us, the European Commission's Deputy Director General, responsible for the coordination of Euratom policy, Massimo Gariba. Welcome. And the CEO of Slovakia's nuclear company Javis, Pavel Stular. Also here with us is Chairman and CEO of leading civil engineering company Bouygues Construction, Pascal Minot. And finally, Chairman of Italy's Ansaldo Nucleare, Roberto Adinolfi, who's also a member of the steering committee of the EU SMR Pre-Partnership Initiative. Welcome, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us. Now, Valérie Masson-Delmotte, you're a renowned scientist. You worked on the IPCC's recent reports, which say nuclear energy could have an important role to play in combating climate change, considering the level of CO2 emissions in Europe and your predictions about increasing temperatures. Is there an ideal energy mix for Europe over the next decades?
What's really striking, if you look at the last IPCC 6th assessment report, is both the importance of the urgency, the ability to act at scale. Just as a reminder, year 2023 is going to be the hottest on record, and we see increasing losses and damages from extreme heat, drought, or rainfall events. And then the agency part, where we have to think in 2 directions related to climate change. The first one is to design energy and electricity systems to be resilient in a changing climate. And the second one is to act quickly to reduce CO2 emissions. And that means phasing out as quickly as possible fossil fuels. The dominant driver of warming are cumulative CO2 emissions. So what really matters is to be able to have, in particular, a low-carbon electricity mix as soon as possible. Nuclear is part of that. Renewable energy is part of that as well. And in addition to the climate change challenges, I would like to add the biodiversity challenges, where pressure on land, use of biomass has to be designed to match the challenges of preserving ecosystems and biodiversity. So avoiding unsustainable use of biomass is also critical. So decarbonizing electricity, decarbonizing heat, and thinking of how to best incorporate nuclear in that mix is really critical to act at the scale of the challenges.
So how do you think that Europe's nuclear industry can organize itself to fight climate change?
I would say the first thing is transparency. Transparency on reporting of emissions, emission factors, including fugitive emissions for the use of fossil natural gas. That really matters along the whole supply chain. And it matters because there's a lot of misunderstanding in the general public about what allows to deliver low carbon electricity, low carbon heat. So transparency, monitoring, reporting, and then having ambitious targets, and not just net zero CO2 targets by 2050, but ambitious targets in the next 5, 10 years. The trajectories that allow to limit warming, well below 2 degrees or close to 1.5 degrees, they imply a decrease in greenhouse gas emissions by a quarter to half by 2030. So having very ambitious targets and then playing on emulation and the ability to deliver, I think, is really the assets the industry can have.
Okay, Luc Raymond, how do you see EDF's role in addressing what Valerie has just outlined?
Well, first I would say that this is the mission of EDF, to provide to our customers, consumers and partners the electricity and the technology that enables decarbonated power. That's really the very mission of the company. That's how the company defines itself since quite a long time. So as of today, we are providing electricity that represents 39 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour. With this, we are among the very best in the world. The average in Europe is 251 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour, means close to 10 times. And the average in the world is 460 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour. So with 39, we could say, okay, we are pretty good, we stay there, we just do our job. No, our mission is to do more. So we are going to improve the number of grams per kilowatt hour that we do in the coming few years. So we have committed, we have released this information this morning. We have committed to go down to 30 grams, 30, in 2030, and to go down to 22 grams in a couple of more years. So with this, we will be, of course, best in class. But that's not enough. We need to do more in terms of kilowatt hours, of course, because the way we measure our impact is how much do we enable ourselves by our own production, and how much do we enable others by the productions that we enable by our technology. That's what will be driving EDF in the coming few years. So making commitments on a pretty low base, but making sure that we drive the biggest possible impact, notably in Europe, thanks to the development that we will support.
We're facing a climate crisis. We're also facing an energy crisis here in Europe. In Slovakia, Pavel Sulla, you felt the direct impact of the weaponization of energy from the Russian aggression. Tell us about your main concerns.
Yes, I mean, thank you. Absolutely, weaponization of the energy is something that we tended to forget about in Europe. I think that we have learned a hard lesson with the invasion to Ukraine, that the energy security, energy affordability, and resilience of the energy network is absolutely critical and will be one of the headlines for the next decades. What is more important with the recent challenges associated not only with the conflict, but also with the decreasing demand for electricity and pressure for decarbonization of the energy mix, countries like Slovakia need to focus really in a long term to make their energy mix more resilient, and also to focus on diversification. But the diversification really means for countries that were using the old Soviet technology like VVR is really not only finding the new sources of nuclear fuel, but really bringing the new technologies, the Western technology in the country, which will ensure the proper diversification and energy security for the future. So for us, what is going on in France, the strong support for the nuclear, because Slovakia will, I think, exceed the France after we put into operation the fourth unit at Mochovce in terms of the share of nuclear energy mix. nuclear will become absolutely critical, so we really want to make sure that we are bringing the new technology that will ensure the diversification and resilience of our network.
So Valerie, EDF's raison d'etre, as we heard, is to produce CO2-free electricity for the well-being of society and industry while contributing to Europe's energy independence. What would you recommend then to the representatives of the European institutions and industry to ensure energy independence for individual countries?
This is not something you'll find in IPCC reports because by nature they have to be neutral and not prescriptive, and they do not define what is a roadmap for different countries or regions. But what is really striking is that Europe is specific compared to other world regions in that it does not produce fossil fuels. So there are multiple interests in avoiding the dependency on imports of fossil fuels and therefore having more stringent standards in terms of phasing out, in particular, oil and gas, and therefore having ambitious targets for instance, the emissions, grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour for electricity, and also having more stringent standards for low carbon heat, which really matters to phase out gas, and where, for instance, the fatal heat is not used as much as it could, in which nuclear and other sectors could contribute more. So this is why I mentioned this dimension of low carbon heat, in addition to heat pumps with low carbon electricity, for instance. And the other point I want to stress is operating in a warming climate matters. So having also the most stringent standards so that the knowledge we have on future climate in Europe can be used to climate-proof nuclear infrastructure is really critical. So there are huge advances, technological advances, I know, that are at play, but being transparent and ensuring a resilient energy mix, operating in a warmer climate, less dependent on water, less dependent as well on biomass, as I stressed previously, because trees are growing slower with more heat and water stress. So it really matters to be able to ensure sustainability in all dimensions, including the hard limits, in a way, posed by a changing climate locally.
Luc Raymond, Slovakia is an example of why energy independence is vital for individual countries. EDF has got a lot of domestic projects going on. Why is EDF feeling compelled to play a part in driving this European nuclear renaissance?
Well, it's not just because this is our mission. This is also the interest of France and the interest of EDF, basically. Because we are at times when, Commissioner Breton was explaining this morning that with 450 million inhabitants in Europe, we weigh something. But that's true for an industry, that's true for regulations, that's true for the energy environment we are living in. So just one country like France today cannot probably build an entire supply chain, cannot build a WNE like the one we have today. So being able to decide what would be our future is a European choice today. And as a company, of course, we want to serve the choice of Europe overall, and the choice of Europe being clear to be going low carbon. We want to serve this choice with our partners in Europe, also serving the resilience of our own choice that way by having a supply chain that goes beyond France, working with partners in the industry sector, whichever level they are or value added they bring in the projects, they do contribute to the resilience of our common supply chain in nuclear. And that's why we want to build beyond France, some of which will be done by EDF for EDF operations, probably a limited number of those. We have some operations like this in the UK today, but most of which will be done with our European partners, with EDF and the entire supply chain of EDF, locally, with local partners, and at European level, serving the purposes of local utilities, local operators. This is how we feel compelled to act in the European frame.
Okay, well, let's talk about the possibilities of working together in Europe. Massimo Gariba, as a representative of the European Commission, what can EU institutions do to ensure the successful deployment of nuclear programs in Europe over the next decades?
Well, first of all, let me say where we are. We have 100 power reactors and an installed capacity of 97 gigawatt electric in the EU, 22% of the electricity that we produce, and in 12 member states. I think it's important to take stock, also because in 2023, we had something new. We have 2 new reactors that went on the grid, and this is not something that happened recently very often. One in Finland and one in Slovakia. Nevertheless, in the EU, the situation is clear. The energy choice is a national choice. So you have to find themes that unite all the member states in that. And the net zero strategy to 2050 and all the intermediate steps that bring to that are an important driver for those who want to use nuclear energy. We have the 2030 targets with 55% reduction of CO2. We have the 2040 strategy, which will come out at the beginning of next year. And I think that this will give a path of certainty to the industry of what is needed. In the past, we have legislated on the safety standards and on the way that the back end of the cycle is to be managed. This is a conditio sine qua non to bring together the ones who are not in favor of nuclear energy. On the positive side, you heard this morning Commissioner Breton, and the fact that the Commission is working to launch an industrial alliance for small and modular reactors. And let me say, Mr. Raymond, that we have been working also with your colleagues of EDF in order to see what kind of capacities we can put up in Europe, throughout Europe, as you said, for the supply chain, in order to ensure that we move forward to that. I say one last word, if you allow me, which is about the second aspect, which I think is extremely important, which is human resources. Human resources is going to be possibly the scarcest resource in the years to come if we don't move all together at national and European level. Thank you.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit more about that then. Let's talk to someone with first-hand experience in what it means to build a nuclear reactor, Pascal Minot, the only company currently building in Europe. Bouygues built the Flamanville 3 EPR nuclear reactor in Normandy that's due to be up and running next year. You're also involved in EDF's UK projects at Hinkley Point C, where there are 8,000 people currently working roughly on the ground, and the Sizewell C project. Tell us then, what are the challenges facing the construction sector with all these projects potentially on the table?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I said there are challenges of different natures. First one goes definitely with the resources. In here, I'm talking about the human resources, not about lacking steel or concrete or whatever. It's about having the right people in the right quantity with the right skills, and this at every level of the project, be it workers, site workers, supervisors, engineers, or project managers, project directors. On all these levels, there are needs for specific skills. Workers will be talking about welders, we'll be talking about steel fixers. Then when it comes to site engineers, we'll be talking about digital tools, using digital tools, developing digital solutions, organizing the site in using techniques coming from industry, which we can apply to those very large projects, and even more so when it comes to a series of very large projects, and then to very large project directors as well, which requires an exceptional set of skills in terms of management, communication, expertise, different types of expertise. So we need to have those training. And to give you an example of what we've been doing in the past, for instance, when Grand Paris Express project came, we knew we had hundreds of kilometers of tunnels to bore underneath Paris. So we set up a training centers to train people specifically to drive tunnel boring machines. Or at the other end of the spectrum, we've set up a new internal training school to train large and very large project managers, because again, it requires different sets of skills. So it's something which we do in an open manner, which we open to the construction more widely and beyond Bouygues, and something which will have to be done as well, both for workers, for site managers, and even to the different person that we. So this is what it will require to ensure that we set up those training centers. That's the first point. The second point is to ensure that those nuclear projects, which are very large, very long, quite often located in not the most attractive places, not necessarily where the people want to live, in a family, for instance. We have to ensure those sites are attractive because of the purpose of those projects. This is very positive, but then making all the social environment around those projects, making it attractive, livable for people with family and with kids. That's something which is quite important, and that we have also the right management level and management qualities to ensure people want to come and work in the nuclear industry. And this is even more so important that already the construction is in a situation of shortage of resources. We lack people to do everything which we have to do aside nuclear reactors. We need to do the energy efficiency of the buildings. We need to care for basic needs, for housing, for education, for health. We also need to develop those very large infrastructure projects beyond nuclear. We're talking about the other renewables, talking about offshore projects, or talking about public transport, which requires also massive investment. So there is already a shortage of skill, and then comes an extra demand, which will require an extra sets of skills and in large volumes. So that's one of the main challenges, having those resources. Once we train them, ensure that we put them to use effectively, i.e. that an electrician does electricity, not waiting, handling, transporting, working across the site, ensuring that we do apply some of the industrial techniques which have proved their worth in other industries, that we do apply them to those mega projects that are the nuclear reactors. And then ensuring that from one project to the next one, we do learn and build and create those series effects whereby you can reduce the cost and improve productivity. So working on the skills, working on the productivity, and then working on the cost simply to deliver the projects faster and cheaper. That's definitely the expectations of our clients and our own goals as well.
Well, we're going to talk about attracting talent, young talent, into nuclear a little later on with a young talent who's come over from EDF in the UK. But first, I want to talk about the supply chain. In May, the Nuclear Alliance announced the need to reach 150 gigawatts of nuclear installed capacity in Europe in order to achieve net zero by 2050. We've heard that there will be a potential 50 new nuclear reactors that could be brought online to meet these needs. Roberto Adinolfi, is the European supply chain ready to take on such a big challenge?
Certainly it is a big challenge, so it is not easy to answer. But let me comment also on the basis of the analysis that we have been conducting as SMR pre-partnership in these years. And let me start from capability. That is the first important thing to guarantee. Certainly the European industry has maintained its capability throughout the value chain of nuclear. And I will not comment even more on this. There is one thing that was coming out of our analysis that is important. That is the flexibility of the European supply chain that we had the opportunity to challenge. More than 60% of the European supply chain seems to be involved in more than one technology. More than 30% are involved in more than two technologies, so they are able to adapt, to innovate, to be adequate also in terms of future needs and not only of the present needs. So the issue is capacity at the end, and is an issue because the figure that you have been presenting are challenging figures for everybody. We know that this kind of growth was possible in the 70s, but with such a different culture and such a different environment that is very difficult to replicate as of today. So capacity will be the issue. Of course, we do have an opportunity, and it was mentioned here, that is the fact that we are now facing this challenge as Europeans and not as nationals. So this makes available the skills that are available in countries in Europe that you will not imagine, perhaps. I'm coming from Italy, a country that is supposed not to be working so much on nuclear, and we have still some capabilities and some capacities there that can be used, and the same is for other countries. So the approach, the European approach that we are talking about is the first answer to this issue of capacity. There are others that should be explored, like the best use of high-quality components in, from the industry application that we can do. But there is one thing that is a preliminary condition that we should take in mind, because capacity means investments, and investments means certainty. So we need clear signals of stability of this market coming to the industry and to the supply chain in order to sustain this. And this is not a chicken and egg issue. This starts from certainties.
Just remind us then of the advantages of creating a European supply chain that shares the same technology and lessons learned.
Oh, let me say that European industry has been suffering, in general terms, I would say, have been suffering of this stop and go of nuclear in the past. So certainly the fact that the first ambition that we should have is to create a much more stable market, a much more broad market, where we can cope with the uncertainties, both the uncertainties in terms of investment decisions that takes time for operators to take a decision of investment, uncertainties linked to the licensing time frame that is, of course, another high uncertainty. So we need to cope with this uncertainty by having a broader market. And so the possibility to have an European market, a very open European market, is absolutely of a priority for the supply chain in Europe. And then the idea to have a common basis to share experience, to look at synergies as well, because perhaps we have to think about the supply chain in a little bit different way for the future. We need to create synergies where synergies can give us results, and there are a lot of synergies that should be created in the supply chain. At the end, especially for SMR, large part of the cost savings that we expect from this business model are materializing in the supply chain, are materializing in the factories where the fleet effects could materialize. So we need to work on the supply chain to create a different environment and a different partnership approach. A win-win approach is a must for the future.
Okay, well, Luc Raymond, we've talked a lot about the advantages of better coordination between countries. EDF often talks about the fleet effect, the fleet approach to a nuclear new build program. And just remind us what that is and the benefits of it.
Well, as I was referring at the very beginning of the new era we are entering in, it compares to what we just lived. And let's face it, we have lived 20 years where by not building enough, we didn't have enough work for the time we had. As a result of this, we've been thinking more than acting in the nuclear industry. We've made tons of studies, but very few projects. The result of that is that we have undone our capacity to build at scale. In the new phase in which we are entering, what is expected by our fellow citizens in Europe and elsewhere is decarbonated terawatt hours. That's a lot of electricity. The only way to get there is to build a lot fast, efficiently, competitively. As any industry, and I don't think that nuclear differs to any other, in a phase where we're entering where we don't have enough time to do all the work we have to do, we need to switch completely to a different world, which is industrializing everything we do, or re-industrializing everything we do, because we knew how to do that 20 years ago. Now we have to re-industrialize all our processes. That means standardizing, that means scaling, that means repeating exactly the same. That means bringing all the supply chain at scale to be able to follow all the projects and moving from one project to the next without reinventing the wheel. It takes a little bit of work to change ourselves into this. But provided that we do that, we are going to be there for the rendezvous of delivering for Europe enough terawatt hours for more electrification and more decarbonation of our continent. And I'm sure that we can also contribute to this at global scale. But it means having a fleet effect exactly by the sense of industry that we are doing. And industry means manufacturing. There is a lot of manufacturing in nuclear. It means bringing together all the components of manufacturing plus civil work, which is huge in nuclear, all this in compressed time and with a sense of time to delivery. This is the key factor for success. It means that all of us have to reload the way we take nuclear projects, and you can count on EDF to be leading us for the projects that we are leading ourselves.
So Massimo Gariba, I want to bring you in once more. Everyone here seems to be talking about the need for a greater European solidarity when it comes to nuclear. For now in Europe, there is a big lack of consistency when it comes to nuclear power. Different countries, they've got different individual concerns and views, which is normal. Is it possible to have a unified stance when it comes to nuclear in Europe?
There are things that unite and things that divide. I think that what I told you before about safety, about the handling of the back end of the cycle, about security of supply, about decarbonization, these are all the things that unite. We have to work in a way that doesn't put different energy sources in competition. If we want to do a epochal transformation to the net zero, we need every single bit. Everything helps. So I think that this logic has to be put together. And I heard transparency. Transparency of operations, transparency of what the issues are, transparency of how we resolve the problems that inevitably are there, are all means to build confidence in the people. The people are not stupid. They understand very well, when you are telling them and explaining them what are the risks and not. I always remember, I have it fixed in my mind, a survey that I've seen by now probably 15 years ago that was done in Finland, that shows how the level of acceptance of a nuclear power plant goes up in the immediate region because the people get the jobs, they get the benefits, goes down in the region that goes, let me say, from 20 to 70 kilometers away because people perceive the risk but they don't get the benefit, and then it goes up again because, of course, it's too far away to create serious problems. So I think that if you talk to these people and bring them together, they will be together with you. And I think there is lots of work still to be done in Europe. We have very good examples like the Onkalo waste repository that is about to start operation in 25, where a 30-year work has been done in order to achieve all that.
Valerie, then, just to bring you in again, from what you've heard today, do you feel optimistic, perhaps, about what the nuclear industry can do in the fight against climate change?
There's no doubt that all solutions are needed. And part of the solution is clearly having a low-carbon baseline, designing the contribution of nuclear so that it also can accommodate a larger share of intermittent renewables that are rising fast. And in terms of relationship to society, what is striking for me is that sometimes, we have more and more polarized debates that tend to oppose solutions. So sharing a vision of what is a net zero CO2 energy mix in every country, and that's the scale of Europe, sharing that vision, putting that on the table, showing which part contributes to that vision and then how it can be implemented, can also help with a shared vision have a larger motivation of society and ownership of society of the changes that are going to be implemented. And one last word. You mentioned the issue of skills. My initial background is energy engineer, And I think that, you know, these challenges of transformations, playing on efficiency, demand, technological solutions and innovations, that's very inspiring for engineers. And you need all talents, men and women. So thinking a way of embedding all talents, and in particular young women, I think that's really important to be fully optimistic.
Well, Valerie, funny you should mention that. EDF is recruiting 10,000 technicians, engineers, and other experts every year until 2030 to meet the growing needs. I'd like to introduce an engineer, a female engineer, whose role is to support EDF's projects in the UK. Jane Lowe is also the co-founder and former chair of the EDF Young Professionals Network. Thank you so much. We're going to cross the fingers that the microphone works. Now, you've worked in the nuclear sector for a decade, Jane, and why did you join EDF and why have you stayed in the sector?
I joined EDF because I wanted a job and they accepted me, so that's a start. But I stayed because the culture in this industry is very welcoming. It allows you to sort of explore your skill set. It really invests in the people. I think that's what draws a lot of people to then join and stay and actually work really hard to support the projects that we're doing. And I think what's most interesting to me is there's a lot of stuff that we can't actually do without electricity. And by the sheer fact that I can introduce myself as I make electricity, I keep the lights on, it's just something that draws attention. And the fact that, you know, this conference can't actually happen without electricity. So that's one of the main points.
Well, a lot has changed in the past decade since you joined EDF, and today the nuclear sector is competing for new talent. We've heard every one of our speakers today has mentioned that. They're competing with other technologies like IT and AI. From what you've heard today in the discussion, is enough being done to attract talent so that the vision that they've described here today can be achieved?
I think it's a yes or no answer. I think yes when there's a clear investment strategy in the technology in nuclear. So I work in the UK, so you can see a lot of projects going on and you can see a lot of opportunities, the job opportunities, research opportunities, and you can see that pipeline of people that you can then draw in. But I've worked with friends who are in different sectors or different countries. You don't necessarily get that same level of exposure, so they don't necessarily know what does it mean to work in the nuclear sector, and there's still this, oh, I'm not a nuclear physicist, I can't work in the nuclear sector, but that's not true, because we hire so many people from all backgrounds and all, like we mentioned, technician, engineering, the admin staff that actually keeps everything running. So I think we could do more, and I think it's somebody touched on this already, it's continuously attracting the talents, and it doesn't end once you're done. It's almost just investing, giving back to the community, finding out, okay, I've done this now, who can I share this knowledge with? And it's that continuous approach and investment back into the community.
Okay, well, let's ask your boss what he thinks, Luc Raymond, and what can you promise Jane's generation then, and those coming after, to convince them, this young talent, to come over to nuclear power and then stay in the sector?
Well, thank you for joining first, and thank you for your commitment and engagement. Well, I think the best promise is that, frankly, you can have fun all the time. That's the best promise, because, you know, my generation is probably going closer to the sunset, professional sunset. You know, I've been involved myself since more than 25 years now on climate change technologies through different type of works. Engineer, financing, and so on and so forth. But frankly, I have the impression after 25 years that the job just starts. And still not too late. So your generation will have the opportunity of the century, which is to make the transition happen. And whether you are an engineer, which is your case, or any other skills are needed for this. And what our business or activity offers is, as you said, you know, you want to work in AI, welcome to nuclear. You want to be the best in industry automation, welcome to nuclear. You are an electrical engineer, welcome to nuclear. You are a nuclear scientist, of course, welcome to nuclear. But then, I mean, any type of knowledge is needed in the nuclear industry. You are a specialist of complex civil works, welcome to nuclear as well. And by experience, when you've worked in nuclear, okay, you have the best reference. Because what we build, what we bring together is the utmost capacity that is asked from engineers together. So having this reference, having this capacity is not only an opportunity to make things happen on something that makes sense for ourselves, for our citizens, for our future, but also is a professional reference that will provide to you forever, for the rest of your career, a reference in the nuclear industry and beyond. If one day you say, okay, I would like to change, welcome to offshore wind, we can do that as well. That's pretty fun as well. Not everyone is okay there, but still, I mean, when you have this reference, you will have learned projects and technical skills in complex projects, which is a reference that serves for any kind of other industry. So that's why I think we should promise to our young engineers and everyone who wants to join us, they will have fun. That's the best promise.
Final word then, Luc Raymond. How do you see nuclear power in 2050?
High. No, I see it as high as we can. First, we have tremendous challenges by 2050, of course, not limited to nuclear power. I would like first to see more electricity, because at the end of the day, we are all here to get rid of fossil fuels. And today, electricity is barely in the most electrified country with the lowest level of carbon electricity. Take this beautiful country, for example, we are at best at 30% of the energy. So there is not a moment to lose. The climate bomb is ticking. We have 70% of the energy that is still fossil fuel based. We need to kick that out. There is not a moment to lose. And that's what we need to shoot for. So that's why 2050 is tomorrow. Nuclear power and other sources of power, electricity overall should be much higher by 2050.
Okay, I think we can all agree with that. Luc Raymond, CEO of EDF, thank you so much. These are critical discussions. The challenges ahead for nuclear are significant, but so are the potential benefits, as we've heard from today's panel. Thank you for everyone for joining us. It's been a real pleasure to share your expertise, and thank you everyone for listening to us. Enjoy the rest of the WNE.